The smoke of Satan. Okay, my name is Joseph Silla Jr. I am a writer of edgy Catholic fiction, so I've written about some. I have demons in my Blind Prophet novel, so a graphic novel, and I've written a book called When the Wind's Dry, an edgy Catholic thriller, which also comes in a Catholic version. It has cleaner language and some Catholic questions and discussion questions and perspective. And we also have Merry Friggin' Christmas, my Christmas comedy. And that comes in a standard edition and my naughty edition. Okay, the naughty edition will have the bad language in it. The standard edition has kind of a clever running joke about why the bad language is not in it. Okay, so it's not just censoring it, it actually is making a literary reason. Now, let's talk about the smoke of Satan. What am I talking about? The subtitle is Pope Pius X's Losing Battle Against the Modernist Heresy. He wrote an encyclical, Pope Pius X, called Pascendi Dominici Gregis, where he laid out exactly what he was having a problem with modernist philosophers in the church. Now, I believe this is the smoke of Satan that Pope St. Paul VI was talking about when he said, we would say that through some mysterious crack, no, it's not mysterious, through some crack, the smoke of Satan has entered the Church of God. There is doubt, uncertainty, problems, unrest, dissatisfaction, confrontation. Okay. I believe that smoke was what Pope Pius X was fighting when he wrote this Pascendi Dominici Gregis. That's Latin. Doesn't really matter what it means. But it was all about the doctrines of the modernists. And so now you will actually, we're going to go through this document so you actually really know what people are talking about when they're talking about modernism. So now, what did Pope Pius X have to say about this? Well, he had a lot to say. But here's a quote for you. The number of the enemies of the cross of Christ has in these last days increased exceedingly, who are striving by arts entirely new and full of subtlety to destroy the vital energy of the church, and if they can, to overthrow utterly Christ's kingdom itself. So he's talking about people who are in the church, who are operating in a way that's going to undermine the church. Now, my case that I'm making is this has happened, and we are being undermined. And why am I so spooked about it? Why am I not writing more novels, trying to lead people, nudge them toward the Catholic faith? We may not have a lot of time left, okay? Because this has gotten really serious in the Catholic Church. This is what Pope Pius was afraid of. This is a picture of our current Pope, Pope Francis. And he's leading a bunch of cardinals or bishops in prayers it appears to this pagan image of a fertility goddess in some kind of a canoe with other trinkets and things around there. This is completely pagan. This has nothing to do with the Catholic faith and Catholic religion, which Pope Francis, as who sits in the chair of Peter, he's supposed to be defending the faith. And he thinks this is a good idea. Now, how does that happen? Well, it could be Pope Francis is just completely an evil Satanist who wants to bring paganism into the church, which, maybe. Or maybe he has some bad philosophical underpinnings in his thinking. And that's what we're going to explore in these talks. Because this has got me spooked. I never thought I'd ever see the Pope of a church with a pagan idol like this, leading prayers, leading a procession around St. Peter's Basilica with a pagan idol. That's an edgy Catholic story, okay? That's something I would write in a fiction. I probably wouldn't even do it in fiction because it's so crazy that nobody would believe it. All right. Let's first get an idea of what our writer of our document, which is Pope Pius X, is so spooked about. He starts off his paper with a section called Gravity of the Situation. And I'm just going to read, these are quotes from him. Okay, so you will get the idea of how serious this is and how scared he was and how he felt like we really have to do something about this. Okay? The partisans of error are to be sought not only among the church's open enemies, they lie hid, a thing to be deeply deplored and feared in her very bosom and heart, and are more mischievous the less conspicuously they appear. Thoroughly imbued with the poisonous doctrines taught by the enemies of the church and lost to all sense of modesty, they vaunt themselves as reformers of the church, and forming more boldly into line of attack, assail all that is most sacred in the work of Christ, not sparing even the person of the divine Redeemer, whom with sacrilegious daring they reduce to a simple mere man. They put their designs for her ruin into operation, not from without, but from within. There is no part of Catholic truth from which they hold their hand, none that they do not strive to corrupt. None is more skillful, none more astute than they in the employment of 1,000 noxious arts. This is strong wording from a pope, right? Their very doctrines have given such a bent to their minds that they disdain all authority and brook no restraint. And relying upon false conscience, they attempt to ascribe to a love of truth that which is in reality the result of pride and obstinacy. We must now break silence in order to expose before the whole church in their true colors those men who have assumed this bad disguise. Now, that is a pope who is seeing some very serious threats to the deposit faith and is going to do something about it, okay? He's in a fight. He's in a fight for the very life of the church. That's how he sees it, okay? Now, in order to understand this document, you need a little bit of theological background because Pope Pius X is writing this to people who know theology, right? This is their business. So he's writing it to patriarchs, primates, archbishops, bishops, and other local ordinaries in peace and communion with the Apostolic See, okay? So he's assuming people know some theology. So I want to make sure we understand some of the basics so we understand his terminology, what he's talking about, and so that you can see what it is that happens and what changes and what causes the problem. And it really is right at the root. It is a digging under the walls, under the foundations of faith and the origins of where faith comes from that causes this spider web of modernist tentacles, everywhere. I'm mixing metaphors, I know, but you get the idea. It's serious, and it infects the entire body of the church, body of Christ, right? The whole mystical body of Christ, which is the church. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about traditional theology, okay? Our main man is St. Thomas Aquinas. They call it Thomist theology or scholastic theology, usually. Now, what Thomas did was pretty ingenious. He was a brilliant guy, right? We had an ancient tradition of philosophy with Aristotle from the Greeks, right? So Thomas took the Aristotelian theology, his, well, philosophy, and added to this in order to get a full picture of the theological picture, because you need to understand God in addition to just the natural, what they call natural theology. All right? So the natural theology, things come from your senses, right? You process them with your reason and your intellect, and then you get knowledge. And you have a natural end to your life, which ends when you die, right? Now, Thomas says that's not the whole picture. We also have God. So we have divine revelation directly from God, and we have a supernatural end where we're judged. Because as St. Paul says, every man lives, and then after this we have the judgment, right? So you either go to heaven, you go to hell, go to purgatory for a while, then you go to heaven. Nobody stays in purgatory forever, right? So there's this order of grace, which we call faith. This is added on to the natural theology or Aristotelian order of nature, right? Or, so the philosophy. So you got philosophy combined with God gives you theology. Now, St. Thomas talks about a few things in here, right? So one of the things that the church has proclaimed is that the existence of God may be known by the light of reason. This is a doctrine of the church. You can't not believe that, right? So what that means is this top layer of this thing, with your senses, your reason, you can figure out that there is one God. And the Greeks did this, right? The Greeks figured out that there was one God, and they even reasoned that that God would try to reveal himself. But that's as far as they went. The revelation was to the Jews and the Israelites. So they got the revelation of God. But the Greeks didn't really get it. But they said this should happen, because if there's a God who created everything, he should want to reveal himself. Okay? So all that can be done with reason. But you can't really know God until he reveals himself. So that's this other line here, right? So things can be known by divine revelation. And then there was something they call motives of credibility, which is how you determine which is more likely to be true, which one is more credible, right? And everybody has a twofold end, right? So you have a natural end and you have a supernatural end. Now, let's see what the new modern theologists took this and did, okay? So they call this Nouvelle Theologie. It's like a French thing, right? And ressourcement. So the idea of ressourcement was to go back to the original sources. So you go back to the original fathers of the church, and you kind of pass over St. Thomas, and you redo everything. But when they redid it with this new kind of modern philosophy, which is more atheistic and more agnostic in its approach. It doesn't assume an existence of God, well, we always reason that there can be a God, but there's no divine revelation. So you can see this whole order of grace on the bottom there. God, revelation, divine revelation, and the supernatural end. We don't have a separate thing for that, right? So we just have our senses, we have reason and grace, and that ends in our supernatural end, right? That's where our knowledge comes from. So everything is kind of originating from our senses, from some phenomenon causing us to reason. And what we're going to find is that when they play this out, there's a desire for religion to resolve the unknown, right? So when you've exhausted everything you can get by reason and your senses, then you feel like, well, I got more to figure out, so that's why I need faith. That's a very big difference from what St. Thomas was saying. And we're going to see how that different distinction actually undermines the entire Catholic philosophy, okay, or theology. So that's the end of part one. I know this was a little bit longer. It's going to be longer because I had to explain a lot of things to get us going. So the other ones are going to just be 1 or 2 slides, and we should be very quick. In our next episode, we're going to talk about the implications that this change of philosophy has on the theological picture and how it works. And you're going to see a picture of a pope struggling to defend the faith against this threat. And it's going to emerge, and you're going to see it even more. And a lot of I'm going to quote more from the actual document so you can understand, mostly so you can understand how spooked the guy was. Really spooked. Okay? Again, you can check out my novels, When the Wood is Dry, my graphic novel, Blind Prophet, and my Christmas story, Merry Friggin' Christmas, an edgy Christmas comedy. Thank you very much. My name is Joseph Silver Jr. This is The Smoke of Satan. We will see you again in our next episode.